Contrary to what some may think, the basic unit of society is not an individual, not even a family. No, it is a relationship. People relate to each other, and by understanding society as a sum of these relations between individuals, we can best arrive at an understanding of why societies turn out the way they do. We do relate to other people, but we do not relate to all of them in the same way. There are some among them to whom we relate more often, in many ways, more than one, more frequently and more strongly. These people could be labeled our group. Within our group, since we are so close-knit together, we tend to perceive ourselves as the real people, the genuine piece, real humans, as opposed to the others, beyond the group. And again, contrary to what some may believe, this is not limited to some isolated, small-scale, traditional societies. No, it is equally true of gender categories, as men being the real ones, as opposed to women and other genders who are not really there yet, to age categories like grown-ups being the real ones and children not quite there yet, but also to racial categories, to social classes like the working classes, and we know that the working classes, well, you know, and to also, more importantly, probably national groups. So we have our groups, and within our groups, we are real. This means that we do not only tend to relate within our groups more strongly, more often, in many ways, more than one, but we also find it difficult to relate to those that are not a part of our group, to the others. They are just so different. These insights are all captured by the concept of a circle of identification. Our group is our initial, original circle of identification. We identify with others who are very much alike, and we tend to find it difficult to identify with those who are not alike. And we are, in fact, very often discouraged from identifying with them by the rules of our own group. The limitations of the circle of identification to our own group have important consequences for our treatment of the others. Since we do not recognize them as quite the same as we are, we find it also difficult to recognize, acknowledge their suffering and their pain. Their suffering is not quite the same as ours. We do not feel their pain in the same way as we do feel the pain of those within our groups. This is a very important difference between us and them, this ability to relate to suffering and pain. This is not as hopeless as it might seem. Circles of identifications can widen. They can expand. They can come to include the others. They can come to allow those within our group suddenly, or not so suddenly, to relate to the pain and suffering of others. This was the case with a debate in human rights in the second half of the 20th century. Are women's rights human rights? And what does it mean that women's rights are human rights? There are some forms of suffering and pain that usually, though by no means exclusively, happen to women, like the pain and suffering of a forced pregnancy, or a pain and suffering of a forced abortion. It takes a widening of a circle of identification to allow this pain to become a part of the structures of common feeling, of shared sensitivities on which human rights are based. It takes, therefore, an effort of widening the circle of identification to make women really a part of our group. And that's all very well, but, you know, circles of identification can also shrink.